And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin' Bible podcast.
Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Talkin' Bible with me, Rohan Bell, and with Georgia Cross. Hello, Georgia.
Hello. We're back.
Back again. And we've got a pretty challenging, meaty passage here.
Yes, we do.
I was just saying to you off air there, I'm doing my master's essay for the current module on a passage just before this. But these chapters in John, probably John 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they are pretty intense.
Yep.
You see Jesus, this is not gentle Jesus, meek and mild in these passages.
Yeah, he has a lot to say.
He has a lot to say. And he goes pretty hard to against the religious leaders, doesn't he? So
yeah, it's good.
So this one is about what it could be a really confusing passage where Jesus compares himself to Abraham, or they try to compare him to Abraham, and he says, "Oh, look, I'll compare myself to Abraham if that's what you want to do." So, so we won't read the whole passage, but maybe summarize and then we'll talk from there.
Yeah. So basically, Jesus is speaking to a group of Jews who had initially believed in him. So that's in verse 31. And then, but as the conversation unfolds, their hostility towards him actually grows.
So suddenly they believed in him, but then they didn't like some of the things he was starting to say.
Yeah. And they're like, "Hang on, I don't agree." And he's like,
Let me go for it. Let me tell you what I think.
And then the conversation shifts from, I guess you could say, that discipleship mode of Jesus into like, no, actually, I have something to say and you need to hear it.
Okay,
and it's quite direct.
Very good.
In that, which is good.
Yeah.
I think from like my little discoveries, I can break it up into 3 different like sections.
Okay, go for it.
So the first section is like about true discipleship and freedom. So in one of the verses it says, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So here, it's like Jesus redefining that belief and going, if you believe in me, and I am the truth, then you'll be set free.
I noticed there he says, "If you," what does it say? "Hold to my teachings."
If you hold to my teaching.
Be interesting to do a study on what it means to hold to his teaching. But I suspect it's not just pay mental assent to his teaching. Oh, yeah, I believe that. I suspect you'll find that it's more about an action. It'll be holding to his teaching, will be actually doing what things he says.
Yes. Yeah. And later in that, he says that. He says later about when comparing them to Abraham and doing that, like this, he's like, wait, you're not Abraham's children because you're not doing what Abraham did.
Yes, that's right.
Which is follow God and trust him.
Gotcha. So there's a lot in this about, it's more than mental assent.
Yeah.
The discipleship life is a life of action and doing. Yeah.
And then a little bit later in the same couple of verses, it says the Jews are like misunderstanding him and insisting that they've never been slaves. So they've never been slaves and that kind of stuff. And I guess my question in that is, well, they have been. Like,
multiple times.
And so what kind of slave, what are they trying to understand?
Yeah.
Jesus is...
I've wondered this myself. I've actually wondered whether or not they're just completely ignoring their own reality because they're getting into a fight with Jesus and they're just clutching at trying to... Straws. Clutching it's a straw man defense, basically.
Yeah.
We're disciples of Moses. We've never been slaves of anyone. Well, you've got to look at the history of your own country.
Yeah.
You've been in exile and you've been to multiple times.
Yeah.
So I wondered if it's just a straw defense
or
whether they just genuinely somehow were still living with this elitist that they are God's chosen and they're really ultimately free and they can basically do whatever they want because they're God's chosen kids or whatever. So it could be either of those. And I don't know if a scholar or commentator would be able to know for sure.
Yeah.
People would have opinions. But there seems to be this thing of Jesus is trying to tell them, hey guys, just because you're Abraham's children doesn't mean you're free to do whatever you want. That's the point he's trying to make.
Yeah, and I think that's what, and maybe that's why Jesus is continuing to challenge that perspective, is because they maybe genuinely believe that, no, we're not slaves because we're chosen and we're, part of that lineage. And Jesus is like, hang on, no. And then literally in the next couple of verses, he says, he makes the shocking claim, I'd say, that you belong to your father, the devil.
Oh yeah, that's pretty intense.
Which is like so intense. It's like, why? Because they reject the truth and act in hatred and deception and all those things. It's like, yeah, well, that's who you belong to. But I guess that's such a heavy challenge to make for Jesus to go, and really like dig into them and say,
Yeah, and note that he didn't start there.
no, yes.
I think that's an important lesson for many Christians because we pick a scripture like that and go, see, we can call people children of the devil.
No.
And, well, first of all, it's who is he talking to?
Yeah.
Well, he's talking to people who have been his disciples. So he's talking to people who've claimed to follow him. And I think Jesus will speak stronger and more firmly to those who claim to work in his name than those who don't.
Yeah.
So his harshest words for the Pharisees and the religious leaders is because they were claiming to represent God.
Yeah.
He's less harsh with the crowds and he's even less harsh with Gentiles because they never signed up to live by that standard. But for people who are claiming to serve God, that's when he will speak up. And so he starts the process and he's really just inviting, look, if you really want to live for me, this is how to do it. If you really want to be one of my disciples, you'll hold to my teaching.
Yeah.
And then it escalates, which you often see in John's gospel. There's multiple times in these discourses he has with people, whether it's the Jews or the leaders or whatever, you see the conversation escalate.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize Jesus didn't set out, just go straight to the jugular. He was trying to win them over, but they just got more and more antagonistic toward him. And so he escalates.
And I like the way that you use it is a conversation. Like in the scripture, as you read it, it is a conversation between them. And it's
Multiple
not just
times.
Jesus saying this. So like there is questions in it and there is back and forth.
Yep. And that's John's gospel all the way through. Multiple of these, his whole large portion of these chapters. So John 4, 5, or even John 3. It starts with John 3, which is Jesus and Nicodemus. So John 3 to John 11 there's multiple conversations that Jesus has with different people. So that's how John's chosen to tell the story. And yes, it's always back and forward, to and fro, where Jesus is either addressing questions they have or he's giving responses to their accusations about him.
Yeah. I have a question. Just obviously there's like a deep understanding for these and Jewish people in general just about belonging to Abraham and that being their father, like in the faith. And I've been doing a little bit of like study around like Abraham and you know the beginning of Genesis and all those things. But I'm just like very interested, and I guess this is what Jesus has come to do, but just if you give me some context behind why for the Jewish people was Abraham
so
such a significant
Gotcha.
person throughout the whole scriptures. Like
Really
there's
good
been
question.
so many great prophets and people in their story, but
Good
Abraham
question.
is
Yes, that's right. Abraham, even though their country is called Israel, who's actually Abraham's grandson, he's still seen as that pivot point. Yeah, good point. And that's really good because we're assuming this knowledge that the average reader will look at and go, I don't even know who Abe is. So
Yeah.
Isn't that Abraham Lincoln?
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole of it's hard to put the significance of weight upon this.
Yeah.
The whole of the Bible story pivots on Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. So so we're talking 11 chapters in, and that's the pivot point. Normally, there's something's balanced. You'd expect it in the middle of Isaiah or Psalms or something.
Yeah.
But the story of the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis is, well, first 2 chapters is God creating a good world, and then chapter 3, sin enters the world, and chapter 3 to 11 is a narrative on the depravity of humans, just getting more and more wicked and further from God, more humanistic, more self-focused, more abusive, more controlling of one another, destroying one another. That's how Genesis 11 ends with the Tower of Babel. Genesis 12 is a break and a brand new start. It's like a pivot point. And at that point it says, God called a man, Abram, and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans. And so why Abraham is so pivotal is he is the person upon which God reset his plan for humanity. That's how they see it.
Yeah.
So they saw, Adam and Eve, there was a plan to start humanity with them, but their descendants failed. It looks at the end of Genesis 11 like it's hopeless. And God chooses a man from actually out of Babylon. So he lives in Babylon, which is like the worst of the worst. He plucks out of the darkness and he chooses this man, Abraham, and he reveals himself to him. And he starts and he says, I'm going to bless you, and all nations will be blessed through you, and I will bless those who bless you, and you have many children, and so on. That's a blessing for Abraham. So it's the pivot point of God's redemptive plan. And he was chosen. Yeah. So God chose Abraham, and what the Jewish people did throughout their history, and especially even in this context, is they are picking up God's chosen Abraham, and they're saying, well, we are descendants of Abraham, so we are chosen too.
Yeah.
What I think they missed was the purpose of that choosing.
Okay.
They thought they were chosen to be elite and be special. I've set you apart from all the other nations of the world. And you can see all this, right? It's in there, but they read those words through a self-righteous, we're better than everybody else mentality. And that's what Jesus is rebuking here. But the reason for Abraham's choosing was not for Abraham. The reason God chose Abraham is that through him he would bring blessing to the whole world. So he would reverse the curse. He would pick one man, and through his descendants would come Jesus, and through him all the world would receive salvation. But they missed the reason for the choosing. They just thought, we're chosen just like Abe, so now we're special. We can do whatever we want because we're God's chosen people, and we look down on everybody else because you're not chosen.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, no, that's not what Abraham was about. That's not what you're about. That's why you belong to the devil, because you're actually living devil's teaching there, which is you can be like God, which is what the devil said to Eve in the garden. You can you can just be like God yourself. And he's rebuking, and he calls them children of the devil for that reason. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's great. And it leads into, I get like the next verse, and it says, before Abraham was born, I am. Yeah. And I think like for the Pharisees at the time, hearing that, it would have been like,
that's blasphemy to them.
Exactly. And it says that in the scriptures. It says they thought it was blasphemy, and they picked up stones. And were ready to...
exactly. There's only a couple of things they can stone people for: adultery and blasphemy. I think that's two. So they picked up stones because they saw what Jesus was doing as blasphemy.
But with that context that you just gave, it makes perfect sense, because the story didn't start and end with Abraham. No. He's not, he's great. Yeah.
And for Jesus to make that claim, because they go, well, he actually says, your father Abraham rejoiced thinking about me coming. And they go, what do you mean? You're only not even 50 yet. Yeah. And that's when he makes that inflammatory statement, before Abraham was born, I am. And they knew what it means. Yeah. They knew that was a statement. He was basically aligning himself with Yahweh, because it's I am is what he said to Moses in the desert. I am uses the same words. So there's no doubt in their mind that Jesus is making a claim that they consider to be blasphemous, because he's claiming to be one with God. But that's the point. Yeah. And that's why he gives him the authority to tell them, guys, you missed this.
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point. You think it's all about your fact that you're circumcised and you belong to this family, but you're not actually doing anything that I expect of Abraham to do. Yeah. And Abraham's purpose is always to win others. Yeah. That was his calling, to be blessed so he could be a blessing to others. They missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, once again, as you start to dissect and give context towards passages like this, you start to understand that Jesus, one, because he's Jesus, he has every right to, but because he knows the story, he knows exactly almost what these people are thinking and interpreting, and he's hitting them to the core. Yeah. He knows exactly what they need to hear. Yep. And so that's that's what I love about even just this chunk of scripture, is that Jesus is hitting hard, but it's hitting home. And
it's hitting home with the hope that some will change. Yeah. And I said this to Tim earlier today too. The thing is, some of these people did. Yeah. We wouldn't have a church. Yeah. I was saying, even in Book of Acts tells us there was an entire sect of the Christian church in Jerusalem called the sect of the Pharisees. So there must have been a whole bunch of Pharisees that actually did, despite the fact Jesus is preaching hard, some of them took it to heart. And at some point, after his death and resurrection, they believed. So Jesus is not out to just out people for the sake of it. He's coming against this wrong believing, wrong teaching, because it's going to destroy them, and trying to give them truth and hope. Yeah. He comes after them pretty strong, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before Abraham was born, I am. Meanwhile, all they can do is accuse him of being a Samaritan. You're a Samaritan, as if just some kind of racist slur or something. Yeah. But he just holds his own. Yeah. Holds his calm. This is Jesus. I would have liked to have seen these conversations, because if it's me, I'm getting all angst and upset and hot and under the collar, and the blood's running to whatever part of the brain it is, and I'd be going all intense. If someone says some nasty things to me, I get all fight back. Jesus isn't like that. Yeah, doesn't affect him that way. So he's just persistent, firm. He's not yelling and screaming at them.
And I think in the most beautiful way, he's actually showing them what it really means to know the truth and be set free by it.
Yeah, good point. Which is what he says. You know the truth, it will set you free.
He literally says it in the beginning of like when you know, and you'll actually feel calm about what I'm telling you.
Yes.
When you know
When you
that,
know the truth.
you'll actually be set free
So good,
from
Georgia.
all the things that you think you need to do, or the things you need to say, or anything like that. And I would assume it's a real challenge for these people, because they're like, no, but we've lived by the law for so long and done the right thing.
Yeah. How dare you tell us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how
I
dare
think-
you invite other people into our
who do you
elite
think you
society?
are? Yeah, we're special. We're
Yeah.
chosen, exactly. We
Yeah.
belong to Abraham. We've done everything right. Yeah.
We've
I
learned
reckon
the
that's-
scriptures. We know the things.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. But Jesus is like, yeah, but if you know me,
It's
all
right.
good.
These are the scriptures that talk about me. You should know me. You
Yeah.
refuse to come to me and have life, he says elsewhere. So I think it'd be worth rereading this conversation and these conversations with the view to, I'd love to see it just played out with the view to the Pharisees, the Jew, in this case it's the Jews. So some of these might be actually just ordinary Jews, not necessarily religious leaders, but people who followed him.
yeah.
They're getting hotter and hotter under the collar, and Jesus is just firm and assertive and calm,
Yeah.
but just hitting them with truth bombs.
Yeah.
And I think, that would actually agitate them more, that
100%.
Jesus isn't smashing back with anger.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just, like you said, he's so in control. I love it the way you said truth sets you free. He's completely free despite being, they're levelling horrible accusations at him, but he knows who he is and he's okay with that.
Yeah. I love like learning about this and about Jesus in that way, because I feel like in the different contexts of my life, I'm in a lot of different places and scenarios and all the things, and particularly when I'm in like a uni setting. I was studying psychology at Wollongong University, and like sometimes you get into some crazy
I
conversations.
bet you did,
man. Like
yeah,
just about, because you're doing hard philosophy stuff.
yeah,
And
it's
so
right. It's philosophical arguments.
Yeah, you're
asking the hard questions.
Absolutely. And like they get into debates, and people would be so like about things, and like don't get me wrong, I love a little debate here and there, but I could walk away from those conversations going like, I know the one that knows, and that's enough.
That's
for
good,
me.
Georgia.
That is so more than enough.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be frustrated walking out of class, because I'd be like, like it's all good.
Yeah.
Like hopefully a seed might have been planted,
yes,
but that's
gotcha.
that's enough. So that's been like, I love hearing the reflections on that and hearing that Jesus like was doing the same thing. Like he's just like, hey,
holding his own.
Yeah. And like strong, like
he's not pushover.
No, he's not. Like,
he's
you might
holding
need to do
truth.
this. Yeah.
That's right. I don't want to offend you. No, he's not. He's pushing back.
Yeah.
But he all the while he's not pushing back with the human way, which is we push back to defend ourselves because we have our pride hurt.
Yeah.
So that we know that's not Jesus, because that's sin. So every time we see Jesus pushing back, we've got to run it through the lens of, well, why is he pushing back? And ultimately, the only reason I can think of that he's pushing back is because somehow he thinks it's in their best interest to hear the truth, because ultimately the lies they're believing isn't going to help them. If they belong to the devil, they need to know that, especially if they think that they're in the darkness, think they're in the light and they're in the darkness. I think Jesus said elsewhere, it says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, if the light you have within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So when you think you're living in the light and it's dark, you're really, really dark.
Yeah.
It's because you're completely deceived.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the point, is these guys, probably mainly men, but they're completely deceived into thinking they're Abraham's children just by virtue of the fact that they're Jewish heritage. And it's not enough to modernize it. We can feel that way. Oh, our parents are Christians, or we go to church. I'm part of a church. I meet people. Yeah, I go to church. But are you really in a relationship with Jesus, or are you pinning it on your I'm of the family of the church? Jesus it's got to go deeper than just pinning yourself to some kind of identity. Yeah. It's got to play out in our lives. It's got to be fruitful in our lives. Like yesterday's podcast. No good if the tree's not bearing fruit.
Yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You have any other questions there?
No, that's good.
Just run over those three for our listeners again, because I really like that. I don't think I've seen that breakdown in that way before.
So verses 31 to 36, where Jesus is talking about you'll know the truth and truth will set you free. Is like true discipleship and freedom is like that first section, and it's talking about that, and and it's almost like a softer introduction once again. Like it's like, hey, like you know, these are
This is the
things that you
invitation
can
into
learn.
life.
Yeah,
Yes,
100%.
gotcha. Yep.
And then, you know, they bite back and he's like, oh, okay, I need to go a step deeper. And so he goes into the spiritual ancestry. And so he goes, hey, I'm going to talk about Abraham now because you know about this stuff. And so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, well, they actually raised it with him. So, yeah, right, I like what you're saying. So he basically he's inviting him into discipleship relationship and saying you'll be truly free if you have this relationship. But they raise it and they go, we're already free. We're all descendants of Abraham. So that launches, Jesus elevates when they elevate.
Yeah, he's like, okay, well.
Let me talk about Abraham now.
Yeah, let's talk about it then.
Yes.
Let's talk about your ancestry. Let's, you know, dig into that. And then that last bit is then him claiming his divine identity. Him going, no, like, you're not getting it. You're trying to unpack the fact that you're Abraham's chosen people.
We're
and all
not
the
illegitimate
things.
children and God's our father and how dare you? And then Jesus says, well, actually, let me tell you who your father really is.
Yeah. Let me tell you, because before Abraham, I am.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Jesus is just calmly responding to their accusations or their claims of authority. And going, guys, wrong claims.
Yeah. And when you forget that it's a conversation, like you go, oh, well, Jesus is just slamming these people. And it's like, no, they're asking. They're asking the questions.
Or claiming things about themselves that are untrue. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jesus is like, no, the truth is going to set you free. So I'm going to
start telling you the truth because it will bring you freedom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it didn't in this case. Spoiler alert. Not for bulk of them. These passages in Jesus. There's another passage. Is it also in John 8 or John 6? I think it is, where he talks about his body and blood, and a whole bunch of disciples walk away from him. Same sort of thing. He just tells the truth.
Yeah.
Fully. He's not trying to build a church. He's not trying to say things that'll get bums on seats in a Sunday so we can say how big our church is.
Yep.
He knows that ultimately better to have people who are 100% in. You know, we're doing the series we're doing this month. It's called All In. We're about being all in for Jesus with our time, our talent, and our treasure. And this is a call to that.
Yep.
Are you really all in? And he's not. This is not Jesus just being gentle, Jesus meek and mild for the sake of getting more followers. He'd rather have the right followers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's tough truth. It's tough love. Yeah. And then we shouldn't weaponize that against others so much as let it turn on us and look at our own lives and go, well, where am I like that Jew? Where am I living with a sense of entitlement?
Yeah.
I said this to Tim. It's very easy to sit back and imagine that we're cheering Jesus on and going, yeah, Jesus, you give it to him, stick it to him. But we're not supposed to read these stories like that. We're supposed to read these stories like Jesus is speaking to us this way. And we've got to let them challenge us and realize, well, where am I entitled? Oh, I don't want to be like that. And let the word of God shine light inside us.
Yeah.
All right. Enough of that one?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Georgia. We'll talk to you tomorrow, everybody.
See ya.